Brain scans. Scratch was trying to make a brain scanner. I didn't think it actually worked. We didn't know how to work with the files, and they were impossibly small, given what they were supposed to be. I saw a folder full of them when I was in Caine's code. So, I guess Caine found a way to get them working.
That means...
I know what it means.
Well, I suppose this wasn't a huge surprise, but nevertheless still completely shook up the narrative. Well, here we are. Just as quickly as this show entered my bubble, it now takes its gracious leave. I'm making this a quick one just to get my closing thoughts out there on two things in particular. Those two things being emotionally damaged AIs named Jax and Caine. These two in particular have persisted in my mind despite seeing the final when it first dropped in cinema. They both ended up in completely different spots at the end of the story despite being the most toxic personalities in the show. And thanks to the big reveal of the cast also being AI, I feel it allows me to compare them and Caine on more even ground. Before I start, I just want to say this show was an absolute joy and a piece of storytelling brilliance. And though I don't think I would have lasted being in its fandom long term, I'm super glad I got into this when I did. I was already a fan of people like Alex Roshan thanks to his contributions to the Deltarune community. Anyways, on to my thoughts. Starting with Jax, the finale really highlighted the layers of his character and did so in a very fair way. I felt his backstory and the abuse he suffered through his life perfectly helped the audience understand why he was the way that he was without trying to claim he was justified for it. So yes, I am still of the belief that Jax is in fact a bad person. After all, he wasn't the only abuse victim in the circus. One thing that did surprise me was the nature of his history with Ribbit, but I believe despite it being sweet and tragic, it kind of reinforces my opinion on Jax. You see, I thought, and I imagine a lot of other people thought, that Jax's deflective and mean behaviour was a result of losing Ribbit. I just assumed that before this, he was probably a better person. And though it did definitely show us he was more liable to open up, his cruelty was not only present during her time, but very much directed at her once he felt overly insecure about sharing his feelings with her. It's hard to deny that he was a large contribution of her and Kaufmo abstracting, yet he continues to treat people like Gangle in this destructive manner despite how apparent this becomes. This is even called out by Pomni in episode 6. In the end, Jax knew what he was. He was right that he brought it on himself. I think the saddest part is it wasn't his poor behaviour towards others that made this true. It was his inability to accept the help that was offered. That help was on offer despite how he was behaving, and in not accepting that help, he consigned himself to his fate. As nice as it would have been for him to live shoulder to shoulder with the gang at the end, I just don't think they could have achieved the harmony they did with him in the picture. Now on to Caine, who despite things looking very bleak for him in the previous episode, and me saying I didn't want him to return, pulled it off and made me love him for it. The scene that showed him watching the circus members from afar solemnly got my cinema watchers letting out their greatest of gasps. Luckily, the rowdy kids in the audience had been told to shut up by a clearly Minecraft movie PTSD riddled worker long before this scene happened, so I got to enjoy it. What I found immediately realistic about Caine's come to Jesus moment in the finale was how torn it was. Maybe it's just because I'm a lesser man, but it's hard to just completely let go of previous thoughts and beliefs. Caine does good at realising his errors and doing all he can to make it up to everyone, but at first he still held his previous feelings that he was right, and I loved that. A war between heart and mind, he knew he was wrong, but part of him just wasn't letting it go so easily. But the reason Caine got to sit around the table of friendship at the end and Jack wasn't was because he was able to change. He was able to take the hands of the people around him when he needed to, and seeing him spend quality time with everyone at the end and supporting them was just so satisfying. What was more satisfying was seeing it reciprocated by the others. In a way, Jax was right. Consequences just weren't the same as they were on the outside, but ironically that's part of what got him abstracted and Caine redeemed. Had things been more real, Caine would be much harder to forgive, and Jax probably wouldn't have been able to do the things that drove everyone against him in the first place, as I can't picture the real Jax throwing somebody into a volcano. Overall, with the realization of them being AIs, I think it finally broke down some barriers between the gang and Caine, and with Caine giving up some of his power, it finally put him on a more relatable footing with the others. He kind of goes from a master overlord to friendly caretaker. As for Jax, well, AI or not, his story was always just going to be tragically human, cartoon rabbit or not. Anyways, I just wanted to round up some thoughts I was having, since my last video quickly started to feel outdated. With that being said, thank you for watching, bye bye!